The man staring through the window. So, my uncle used to work a lot when I was younger. He'd done a lot of things to make money, but one consistent thing is that in the summer months and into late fall, he paints houses. It's a legitimate business and everything. He's got a truck with a number and a name and supplies in the back, the works. Every now and then he would call my dad when he needed a little extra help, and I'd work for him. No big deal really, it's just painting houses. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it takes a while to paint a whole house. If the weather conditions aren't right, then you can't paint. One particular fall, it was extremely wet. It rained what felt like every single day. My uncle would paint multiple houses at a time, so sometimes he would get caught up due to situations like this and I work a little bit more than usual. That was fine by me though. The job wasn't hard and it paid well. Anyway, it was a warm day for late fall, but there was still a distinct chill in the air, one that kinda penetrated through you and stung your soul. My uncle had this job he had to finish. It was an old Victorian house in a quiet part of town. The lady and her husband, who was an author, and there were family issues going on at the time, which further complicated things. So my uncle gets a call one day from the lady who lives at the house. She says that her husband is trying to write his next book, but he keeps getting distracted by the scaffolding outside the house, so she wanted to know if we could come over and finish the job as soon as possible. My uncle was always an honest businessman. They had contracted him to do the job in midsummer, but he had lots of jobs that summer and the wet conditions I mentioned above made it difficult to finish. However, these people were insistent but really polite, and not wanting to lose customers or get a bad recommendation, my uncle decided to pull the house together as a high priority. After all, it would only take a day or two to finish. So we show up to this house mid-afternoon. Like I said, it was a weird kind of chilly day, and I also remember a really eerie calm. The day was slightly overcast, so everything was shrouded in gray. It was like the perfect setting for a mystery crime novel. So we arrived at the house and my uncle and I moved to the back. The front of the house was already done, so there was nothing left there. My uncle, being the more experienced painter, would always do the touch-ups and I would simply apply the first coats, since they took skill. Anyway, we get back to the house and he asked me if I'm scared of heights. I was 17 at the time, and although they do creep me out a little, I didn't want to seem like a child in front of my uncle, so I told him I wasn't. He was happy to hear that. He had me climb up the scaffold to the third floor to finish an upper section of the house. There was a window up there, a small little oval one that looked into the attic. The attic also happened to be the husband's study. He would do most of his writing there. So I'm climbing up the scaffolding, cans of paint dangling behind me, and various paint tools and brushes in the utility belt my uncle let me borrow. I get to the top of the scaffolding and set all my supplies down. I crack open a can of paint and start painting like I had a few hundred times before. Outside of the temperature, the overcast, and the eerie calm, this day was like any other. I was working my way across the top part of the house when I get to the window that looks into the study. I bend down, dip my paintbrush, and stand back up to paint above the window. The window was in my direct line of sight, and I couldn't help gazing in. I see a man, the husband, staring back at me with a face completely barren of any emotion. I had never seen a face so devoid of feeling before. I still haven't. Of course, I get started and take a step back. I chuckle and smile at the guy, but he doesn't smile back. Instead, while remaining completely emotionless, he draws a pistol up to his head that he was holding in his hand the whole time and proceeds to blow his brains out without ever breaking eye contact, right in front of me while I'm staring at him. In utter shock, I gasped and let out the smallest scream as I stepped back in fear. Only I stepped back a step too much and fell off the scaffolding. Alerted by the gunshot, my uncle leapt up just in time to see me fall off the scaffolding from the third floor. I was lucky enough to land in a bush and only suffer a broken ankle and a few scratches. The biggest wounds happened in my head. I had to go to counseling for a while. It's been years since then and I still remember that man's face. I've never forgotten it. It will always be burned into the back of my head. I know why. Looking back, his face was so devoid of emotion, because he never felt any emotion at all. He literally didn't care about what he was doing. As it turns out, the man was seriously depressed and faced marital issues with his wife. Combined with a few too many nights drunk on whiskey and facing writer's block, I guess he decided he couldn't take it anymore. His wife moved out of the house shortly after and we never finished the job. To this day, the house remains abandoned and I try not to drive down the street. I'm scared that if I do and happen to pass the backyard, I'll see that man staring back at me from the window, cold and emotionless.